Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Giridhara. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Giridhara. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Giridhara. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Giridhara. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Giridhara. Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Korna Chai Pusha Shri Ki, Shri Chasinath Maharaj Ki, Shri Giridhara Ki, Shri Nasindev Bhuvan Ki, Shri Prabhupada Ki, Shanchara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, the final lesson. So, take care of the bones as long as possible, said Prabhupada. But the real life is here. Always remember that. The material world means we are simply all protecting bones and flesh together. But they have no knowledge of what they are. And when Atreya Rishi visited Srila Prabhupada and asked that he visit Tehran, Prabhupada said that he was ready to go, but now you have to take a bundle of bones. These were, of course, the same themes that Prabhupada had always taught, the same themes that were in his books, but the lessons were more poignant and striking when Prabhupada applied them to his own situation. More than one devotee compared Prabhupada to Bhishma Dev, who gave important instructions in his last days, as Bhishma felt no pain and delivered learned and loving discourses, even from his bed of arrows. And as Bhishma determined by his own will the time of his departure from the world, so Srila Prabhupada spent his last days oblivious to his physical condition, defying death, and instructing his spiritually innocent sons. But Prabhupada's sons could no longer stand by and simply hear the philosophical lessons. Prabhupada had accepted their affection when they had cried for him to stay with them, and now they wanted to express that affection in the only world they understood, the world with Srila Prabhupada living and talking with them, laughing or reprimanding them as he liked. They wanted him to eat and drink and become physically strong again. But again, Srila Prabhupada seemed to change, and he began refusing food and drink. He had postponed his passing away to exchange lovingly with his disciples, and yet at the same time, by refusing to eat or drink, he was showing his preference for passing away. He admitted when pressed that it was an impossible course of action to live without food or drink, nor did he expect or want miracles, but if he was to get better, it would be by taking nourishment. But for reasons of his own, he would not eat. He said recovery was material, and he didn't want it. Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, The History of the Life of a Jamil, Texts 3, 4, and 5. Dharma Lakshanana Narakaschanuvarnita Manvantarascha Vyakyata Adya Swayambhavo Yata. Translation. You have also described at the end of the 5th canto the varieties of hellish life that result from impious activities. And you have described in the 4th canto the first Manvantara, which was presided over by Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. Okay, so we'll read verses 4 and 5. Priyavrato tanapado Vangshash Tach Charitani Cha Dvipa Varsha Samudradri okay. Nadi Udyana Vanaspatin Priyavrato tanapado Priyavrato tanapado Vangshascha charitani cha Dvipavasha samudradri Nadyudhyana vanaspatim Dharamandala sangstanam Agalakshanamānata Jyotisham vivaranam cha Yatedamāsrijad vibhu Priyavrato tanapado Angashaschacharitani cha Dvipavasha samudradri Nadyudhyana vanaspatin Dharamandala sangstanam Agalakshanamānata Jyotisham vivaranam cha Yatedamāsrijad vibhu Priyavrato tanapado Vangashaschacharitani cha Dvipavarasha samudradri Nadyudhyana vanaspatin Taramandala sangstanam Bhagalakshanamānata Jyotisham vivaranam cha Yatedamāsrijad vibhu
Dharamandala samstana Bhagavatam Yotisham vivaranam cha Yedidam ashtuchatibu
Yes.
Jyotisham vivaranam cha Yatidam asujat vibhu
Priyavrata of Priyavrata Uttanapado and of Uttanapada Vangsha the dynasty Tacharitani their characteristics Cha also Dvipa different planets Varsha lands Samudra oceans and seas Audrey, mountains, Nadi, rivers, Udyana, gardens, Janaspatin, and trees, Dara Mandala, of the planet Earth, Sangsthanam, situation, Bhaga, according to divisions, Lakshana, different symptoms, Manata, and measurements, Jyotisham, of the sun and other luminaries, Vivaranam, of the lower planetary systems, Cha, and Yata, as, Idam, this, Ostrajat, created, Vibhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and King Uttanapad. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets and stars, with varied lands, seas, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth, the luminaries in the sky, and the lower planetary systems. You have very clearly described these planets and the living entities who live on them. Please repeat. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and King Uttanapad. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets and stars, with varied lands, seas, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth, the luminaries in the sky, and the lower planetary systems. You have very clearly described these planets and the living entities who live on them. Report by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Here the words Yatedam Ostrajad Vibhu clearly indicate that the Supreme, the great Almighty Personality of Godhead, created this entire material world with its different varieties of planets, stars, and so forth. Atheists try to conceal the hand of God, which is present in every creation, but they cannot explain how all these creations could come into existence without a complete intelligence. Without a competent intelligence and almighty power behind them. Simply to imagine or speculate is a waste of time. In Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, I am the origin of everything. Mata sarvam pravartate, whatever exists in the creation emanates from me. Iti matva bhajanti mam buddha bhava samanvita. When one fully understands that I create everything by my omnipotence, one becomes firmly situated in devotional service and fully surrenders at my lotus feet. Unfortunately, the unintelligent cannot immediately understand Krishna's supremacy. Nonetheless, if they associate with devotees and read authorized books, they may gradually come to the proper understanding, although this may take many, many births. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.19, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavam Mam Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadulabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Vasudeva, Krishna, is the creator of everything, and his energy is displayed in various ways. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 7, 4 and 5, a combination of the material energy, Bhumi, Apo, Nalo, Vayu, and the spiritual energy, the living entity, exists in every creation. Therefore, the same principle, the combination of the Supreme Spirit and the material elements, is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. Namagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Varijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Vitam Shah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Taptakanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Aditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here, Maharaj Parikshit is continuing to compliment Shukadeva Goswami on his discourse, which we now have as the Srimad Bhagavatam in this form. And in this verse, Maharaj Parikshit is especially thanking Shukadeva for asserting very categorically that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the creator of all manifestations and also the creator of all of the intricate divisions of the manifestations and the creator and the designer of the different systems that maintain that creation throughout time. So in all dimensions, in the different spatial dimensions and in the different time dimensions, Krishna is the Supreme Person who is conscious of every aspect of that creation and conscious of every movement, every flowing of the different development of that creation, and also is the controller of the annihilation and the recreation. So when the demigods actually approach Krishna in the womb of Devaki to offer prayers, the first prayer they offer is Satyavratam, means you are always true to your vow, and you are the truth in all aspects. Whatever aspect of truth exists, you are the source of that truth. So this is a very important verse. And when great personalities glorify Krishna, when the great demigods Like, so that's all the demigods come there to glorify Krishna. So they want to make their statement as unambiguous as possible. So they cover all different aspects of the truth. Because the truth is something which is studied, it's been studied as long as we know. People have been discussing what is the truth, what is reality, how do we know reality, how do we develop our consciousness to be able to understand reality. This is really like the essence of not just philosophy, but also psychology and all of the different studies of mankind. So, especially in the Bhagavad Gita, in Srila Prabhupada quotes 3 verses from the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita to back up what Shukadev Goswami has been teaching Maharaj Parikshit. And so he quotes from the Bhagavad Gita. So I just want to read some verses from the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It's interesting. Yesterday I was speaking to Prabhupada Pranaprabhu about different kinds of doubts that arise in the mind. And he was saying that doubt actually is an opportunity to increase our faith. So this chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, it's a very potent means to re-establish our faith in the absolute nature of Krishna. And Krishna assures Arjuna at the beginning of the chapter that he says, now hear, O son of Pritha, how practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So that, this is very important. So you may think, well, why is it if you can know Krishna in full, why is it necessary to say free from doubt? Because if you know something in full, then why would you doubt? But it's the nature of the mind to doubt. And in that sense, we can actually consider the mind our friend, because by giving us the opportunity to doubt, then it forces us to study to be able to clear that doubt. And here in this verse, Krishna says, this is the way you will become free from doubt. Krishna knows that philosophers since time immemorial have been doubting the word of the Shastras. There's so many different, six different philosophical schools who doubt that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it's only the presentation of Vyasadeva which is able to prove that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But that proof is not just a philosophical proof, it requires entering into a relationship with Krishna. And here Krishna says that also, that it's only by practicing yoga in full consciousness of him, with mind attached to him, that you can know him in full, free from doubt. So you will not be free from doubt until you're practicing yoga in full consciousness of Krishna, with mind attached to Krishna. So it's interesting, the Srimad Bhagavatam presents many philosophical truths, but its ultimate conclusion is that you won't be satisfied by those philosophical truths until you've actually entered into the practice of bhakti yoga. And Srila Prabhupada, whenever Srila Prabhupada has an opportunity to stress this in any of the purports of the Bhagavad Gita, then he does so. Whenever there's any doubt, whenever there's any doubt that our minds might create because of the mind's nature to always be looking for contradiction, then Srila Prabhupada is there to direct us again to this conclusion. So here's another very categorical verse by Krishna. Mama petya puna janma dukalayam shashvatam napnavanti mahatmana sangsidim paramam gata. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So, this is a very important verse that by practicing Krishna consciousness with mind attached to Krishna, practicing this yoga with mind attached to Krishna, we will return to the spiritual world, and we'll never want to return to the material world. And this is the conclusion of the great souls, of all of the great souls whose words we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and especially Lord Brahma, when he sees Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, when Lord Brahma steals the cowherd boys and the cows, and then Krishna reveals his absolute nature. And then Lord Brahma surrenders to Krishna and surrenders his intelligence. And he says that people may claim to know you, but I can say that I don't understand even a little tiny part of your power and your wisdom and your opulences. And actually any ability to doubt the words of Krishna come from Krishna. So we can actually, in that sense, we can take doubt as being a kind of mercy upon us to force us to go to the very deepest level of knowledge so that we remove all doubts. So as the doubts come to the surface, we can understand, perhaps there's more doubts in here. So, and therefore we can conclude we'll never be satisfied just by knowledge of Krishna. That will not satisfy us. It has to be mind attached to Krishna. It has to be practicing yoga in full consciousness of Krishna. Because unless we're emotionally attached and spiritually attached to Krishna, then we'll always be disturbed by the doubts, because doubts, it's actually a function, it's actually a nourishing function of the mind to bring up doubts so that we're impelled to read Shastra, so that we're impelled to approach the spiritual master. So in Srila Prabhupada, in the purport of this verse, the supreme planet Goloka Vrindavan is described in Vedic literature as Avyakta and Akshara and Paramagati. In other words, that planet is beyond our material vision, and it is inexplicable, but it is the highest goal, the destination for the Mahatmas, great souls. The Mahatmas receive transcendental messages from the realized devotees, and thus gradually develop devotional service in Krishna consciousness and become so absorbed in transcendental service that they no longer desire elevation to any of the material planets, nor do they even want to be transferred to any spiritual planet. They only want Krishna and Krishna's association and nothing else. That is the highest perfection of life. This verse specifically mentions the personalist devotees of the Supreme Lord Krishna. These devotees in Krishna consciousness achieve the highest perfection in life. In other words, they are the supreme souls. So then this reminds me of chapter 13. Text 8 to 12. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization and the philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. So there's a lot of items there. And these items, Srila Prabhupada said the most important of these is constant and unalloyed devotion to Krishna. So that, as we know, practicing constant and unalloyed devotion to Krishna is a time-consuming task. If we decided that that's all we were going to do in our life, then we definitely wouldn't have any time for anything else. And the other items here are ways to assist us in that constant and unalloyed devotion to Krishna. So doubts arise when we're not engaged in that activity. However, Krishna is very kind, and he knows that until we attain that intense attachment for him, and until we attain that constant, unalloyed engagement in his service, until we attain that, then we will be troubled by doubts. So therefore, he's given the whole philosophy. And that philosophy in itself is a form of yoga, it's a form of worship. And we can meditate that Krishna is directly speaking this for my benefit. So also there's so throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, great personalities, great kings, yogis, rishis, and devotees are speaking both philosophy and they're speaking the practice of devotional service. And so we don't know what doubts may be there in our hearts. We don't know what reservations we may have. We're not sure what actually is impeding our devotional service. So Shukadev Goswami, Shonaka Rishi, Sutta Goswami, they're giving us everything in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And they're trying to quote as many authorities as possible to present devotional service from all angles of vision. And in chapter 87 of the 10th canto, and even the Vedas personified are called in to give their assertion of the necessity to become attached to Krishna, and that this attachment is the only means to overcome doubt. So there's one verse, I was reading this chapter last night, the prayers of the personified Vedas, and many of the verses are really asserting, it's like the Vedas come personally to give their assertion that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in one verse here, they give a very nice instruction about the nature of the mind. The mind is like an impetuous horse that even persons who have regulated their senses and breath cannot control. Those in this world who try to tame the uncontrolled mind, but who abandon the feet of their spiritual master, encounter hundreds of obstacles in their cultivation of various distressful practices. O unborn Lord, they are like merchants on a boat in the ocean, who have failed to employ a helmsman. So the spiritual master, he's Kana Dara. That's nice. It's interesting. This is right at the end of the 10th canto, and right at the very beginning of the first canto, the sages address Sutta Goswami as Karna Dara, that he's the helmsman, he's the captain who can direct the boat over the ocean of the material energy. So the absolute necessity of the spiritual master is stressed here. And one of the main, perhaps the most important duty of the spiritual master is to enable the disciple to cultivate real humility, because without that humility, it's not possible to understand our relationship with the Supreme Lord. And that means it's not possible to understand our relationship. And so we may have doubts in the qualification of a prospective spiritual master, but unless we accept the principle of a spiritual master and the necessity of that principle, then we can't understand our infinitesimal nature, and therefore we won't be able to recognize that person. And so, and Lord Chaitanya came to teach us this principle of becoming just like a particle of dust at the lotus feet. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavambado. Vishame bhavambado, in this ocean of material suffering. O son of Maharaj Nanda, I am your eternal devotee. At Samudra, I have entered in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me like an atom at your lotus feet. And so unless we have that understanding that we're like just an atom at the lotus feet of Krishna and the lotus feet of our spiritual master, then we can't actually understand that relationship. So just as whenever we read Shastra and we get some realization and we feel fortunate to have this great body of knowledge, this treasure house of knowledge, whenever we have that feeling of gratitude, then we can think that, well, if I want this feeling of gratitude to become constant, then I need to be always in this situation of being very small, because I won't be able to understand if I'm not in the correct relationship. So it's described that it's not possible to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and challenge him at the same time. It's not possible. However, doubt is there so that we, through that kind of challenging spirit, we ask the kind of questions that we need to hear. But the goal is not to understand. The goal is not to constantly understand the answers to all of the intricacies of the universe. The goal is just to understand our relationship with the Supreme Person and all of the beings in that universe. So Srila Prabhupada, it's nice, one verse, Tasmat Ramindriyanyado Niyamya Bharatashma Papmanam Prajihi Gyanam Gyana Vinashanashanam. Therefore, in the very beginning, curb this symbol of sin, lust, by controlling the senses, and thus destroy and curb the enemies of knowledge and self-realization. So Srila Prabhupada gave us the method of curbing controllership mentality by always engaging us in practical devotional service. This is and because he understood because of the connection through the parampara to all of the pure devotees, then that devotional service, however unimportant it may be in material calculation, but that devotional service performed with focus to satisfy the spiritual master who's in that disciplic succession. That's a transcendental activity which will help re-establish us in our real constitutional position. And when we're in that constitutional position, then we'll understand everything in a way that will enthuse us. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments?
It's interesting looking at it from a different perspective. He says that doubts lead to arguments, and arguments lead to anarthas. And all doubts are born of the time factor, past, present, and future, because the seed doubt of all doubts is that original question is when did I fall down into the material world? So any of the doubts stem from that original seed. He said, by being situated in the eternal present, and we can defeat all doubts because we've transcended the time factor. So a doubt is like trying to conjecture, trying to measure something. So when you rise above that, you realize, well, everything is just as it is, and has been like this forever. You know, the grass is green, the sky is blue, Krishna is God. That's just it, all in one go. That kind of neatly overwhelms all doubts.
Well, does it overwhelm all doubts?
I have my moments.
Yeah. Well, in the sense that we have unlimited service for Srila Prabhupada, and there's definitely unlimited service there. Srila Prabhupada wanted everyone to have a complete set of his books. He wanted everyone to have Radha Krishna deity. He actually said that at one point. Well, anyway, at least he said to have Gauranitai deities. And he wanted the holy name to be heard in every town and village. So, we can be living in the moment by always endeavoring to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's desires. But to be able to do that, because we've heard it so many times, but to actually be able to do that and not to listen to the mind actually requires more than just information, requires more than just hearing that knowledge, but it requires complete faith and devotion to the spiritual master. And to develop that devotion requires a gradual process. That's what Srila Prabhupada said in that purport to chapter 8, verse 15 of the Bhagavad Gita. The Mahatmas receive transcendental messages from the realized devotees and thus gradually develop devotional service in Krishna consciousness and become so absorbed in transcendental service that they no longer desire elevation to any of the material planets. So it's a gradual process even for the Mahatmas, So, Mahatma Atokshaja, I'm not being sarcastic. Because, the devotees who have been serving in the temple within Srila Prabhupada's mission like, for more than half their lifetime. They're undoubtedly Mahatmas, great souls. And they're on the path of gradually developing devotional service and full Krishna consciousness and becoming so absorbed in transcendental service that they no longer desire elevation to any of the material planets. So that means any of the material planets means anywhere else than you are right now, basically. It means you don't desire to be anywhere else at any time than you are right now, because right now you're engaged in transcendental service to Krishna and to your spiritual master and to all the devotees. So, yes, and so that's really a very powerful knowledge that this process will bring us to a state of consciousness. And we, as you say, we don't desire to be anywhere else than we are right now at every moment. So, thank you very much. Mantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shikodanatai Mai Poshashi ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki, Shri Giridharila ki, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Manchakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.